Welcome back to Mr. Harris Maths School. Mr. Harris Maths School. Today we're going to be looking at changing the subject, or subject the changing, or whatever we want to refer to it as, without any Yoda impressions. I'm going to be going through how the process works, then providing you with a lot of practice on how to do it, and obviously pushing my practice makes permanent focus at the moment, which is you need to go away and practice the worksheet that is in the description below to really get to grips with how to do it. But I'm going to go through that, and we're going to have lots of examples in this session. So we haven't got much time, so let's just get straight on with it. So let's go straight over to where I'm going to be talking about this today. And we are going to be looking at changing the subject of equations. And the reason this is important to study is because as you get further into GCSE, it's going to be important that you change what in algebra you're completely comfortable changing what your focus is, especially when there's more than one variable. Now this is a real life application. For example, if I was dealing with speed, distance and time, it's a fact that the speed is the distance divided by time. That is a fact. However, in not all situations do I want to work out what the speed is. Sometimes I might know the speed, I might know the time, but I need to know the distance. So it's very important that we have the skills to be able to manipulate equations to work out which thing we want to calculate, or what we're working with. And that's what today's all about. So we're going to be learning about changing the subject, what the subject of an equation means, about that, and then how we can use BibMaths to help us. And hopefully by the end of today's lesson, we will have a better understanding of what is going on. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to just remind you, please do send some work to me. I know you're year 7 to 10 and you're too cool for school, but some of you might be year 6 to year 5s getting ready for going to secondary school, but the more stuff I see, I want to see the worksheets being done, photos of them. I will then share that on the thing. I want to have like graphical representation of the work we've been doing. Otherwise, I don't know whether people are actually listening to me or just sort of switching me on the background and sort of laughing at my silly self. So, I'm starting today by talking about the story of Sleeping Beauty. This is because my wife made me sit down and watch Maleficent yesterday. I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't a film I'd seen before. And so, Maleficent is all about a story of Sleeping Beauty. More on that in a second. But the story of Sleeping Beauty is this. Aurora is a princess that an evil witch comes and curses her that on before her 16th birthday she will prick her finger on an enchanted spindle and fall asleep for eternity until she has true love's kiss. Now this is a fairy story from years and years ago, and it's been passed down from generations, and it has various different iterations. Now the story of Sleeping Beauty is told with the subject of the story being Aurora. She is the Sleeping Beauty. It is told from her point of view. The story is all about her. And so she would be the subject of the story. Now, the reason I mention this, because you might think that's not very mathematical, but the story of Maleficent still features Sleeping Beauty. However, it is told with a different subject. It is told from the point of view of the lady that in the original story of Sleeping Beauty is thought to be the Wicked Witch, or the evil witch. However, in this story, she becomes an anti-hero. We see why she's evil, or we see that she is hurt and damaged by someone she thought was her friend. We see that she is abused and attacked by the humans. We see that she's completely mistreated. They chop her wings off. She is completely damaged to the point where she does the cursing because she feels so sad. Now, this is a completely different subject. It's the same story, but looked at from a different angle. We can change the subject. So this is a story that I watched yesterday. This is the story of Prince Charming. Now, obviously, you can see a nice picture of Prince Charming. Now, Prince Charming is, from his point of view, if you tell the story from his point of view, he rides through a forest and then comes upon a beautiful princess, and they talk and they chat and they get to know each other, and for some reason within about 2 days or maybe even less, he falls completely in love, which is unrealistic, but for the sake of a fairy story, we'll let that pass. The next thing that happens is he rides off, and then the princess goes missing, and he finds out the princess is asleep. And so he goes in there, and he decides to kiss the sleeping princess. Now, this is something I have a bit of an issue with. Although it's a lovely fairy story, I don't quite like the idea that a Prince Charming would kiss someone without permission or without consent. I feel that's a bit uncomfortable. I know it's just a story, but still, I feel the idea of kissing someone who is passed out and unable to say no is a bit weird. So, when you change the subject of the story, you see the story in a very different light. The story can be changed just by looking at a different subject. Well, how does this relate to mathematics? Well, we can change the subject of an equation. You can see in this equation the subject of it is y, because it is y equals 3x minus 5. The y is the thing we are focused on. Just like there's 3 different focuses in the stories I just talked about. The first one was Sleeping Beauty was the subject, then Maleficent was the subject, then Prince Charming was the subject. Here, the subject is y. It's the thing we're talking about. Y? Oh, what's y? It's 3x minus 5. If we want to change the subject, what we can do is just do the same thing to each side. So we start with y equals 3x minus 5. We're going to add 5 to both sides, so y add 5 equals 3x. And then we're going to divide both sides by 3, and suddenly x is now on his own, or her own. X hasn't really got a gender, but x is on their own, and y plus 5 divided by 3 is what x is. X is now the subject. Much like we said in Maleficent, they changed the subject of the story and focus on the witch instead of focusing on Sleeping Beauty. In this one, we change the subject of the story and focus on the x instead of focusing on the y. Now, this is one way of doing it, by doing the same thing to both sides, and hopefully this makes sense. However, I like your comment, Eddie. Yes, I am already married. If the other beautiful princess that's downstairs with my daughter found out I was kissing Sleeping Beauty, I think I'd be in a lot of trouble. Now, the other way of doing it needs me to go over to my whiteboard. So that's what I'm going to do next. On my whiteboard, you can see I have got y. Where are we? Well, I'm going to write y equals 3x minus 5. We've already talked about one way of doing this. Another way is using the story approach. Here is my story approach. Once upon a time there was an x. Let's look at the story of what happens to it. It gets times by 3 to make 3x. And then it gets minus 5 to make 3x minus 5. And that is what equals to y. So this is like a storybook. Tell the story of x. It gets times by 3 and minus 5. Now, something that helps with that a lot is using BIDMAS. Now, I know for some students, depending on your primary school, that might be called BODMAS. I've always also seen it as BEDMAS as well, where O is order, E is exponent, I is indices. I'm sure there's a BUDMAS and a BADMAS somewhere as well, but they all mean the same thing. They mean do brackets first, then little powers, and then we do divide, and then multiply, then add and subtract. And these kind of go at the same time, and these go at the same time. But that tells us we should go, when we're going through the story, we do the timesing first before the minusing. However, what we're going to do is we're going to read the story backwards. To change the subject, we're going to read the story backwards. We've told it from the point of view of x. Let's read it backwards now. Y, and we do the opposite thing. So the opposite of minus 5 is to add 5. We just have to have an understanding of opposite operations. I've got that same problem I was having the other day. I realised it was something wrong with the pen itself. So that's why that's been happening. And we can fix that, and hopefully I've just clicked it out again. And we can change now to there. It's just getting a bit temperamental. There we go. Plus 5. And then divide by. This was happening yet the other day, and it stopped happening, so I was all happy. And just to be helpful, it's decided it's going to raise its head again, but we're not going to lose our temper to it. We're going to stay nice and calm, and we're going to get it working. So let's stay nice and calm. We're going to go add 5. I do apologise for this. It was going so well. Part of it may well be my slightly sweaty hands. So that we'll see if we can get it working properly. So each time we're going to go back through it, doing the opposite operation. And then we get to the x again. So this time we've got y plus 5 and then divide by 3, which is y. It is y plus 5 all over 3. So as you go through it, that tells you that therefore the x equals y plus 5 all over 3. Okay, so we can do that with all the questions from the worksheet that I've given you. And what I've done is I've assembled it, so I've got them all here ready. And what I was planning on doing was doing a hard one and an easy one from each sheet. So we'll do question 1 and we'll do question A and U. That should help you to see what it is you need to do each time. So the very first question is F equals W plus 7M. I think I'm going to need to buy a new tablet so that this doesn't happen anymore. F equals W plus 7M. So what we have to do is tell the story of W here. Well, W has just been added 7M. Because it's not been done anything else to it, and that made F, when we read it back, it's minus 7M to make W. So the only thing we have is that W equals F minus 7M. The story of this first one is W was sitting there minding his own business and he got added to 7M. So when we tell the story backwards, we do the opposite, which is take away. So I do apologise for anyone who's following this and the pen is really annoying me. So the other one. We're going to do purple. We've got the story of W is there is a W and it has been times by R squared. Do you see this bit is R squared times W? Then it was then it was times by minus 1. That's why it's minus. Then it was added to N. So if we're going to tell this story backwards, that makes P. We're going to have to do the whole thing backwards. P minus N, because we're going to do take away N. Then we're going to divide by minus 1. And when you divide by minus 1, you change the sign of everything. So we can do that. So I got P minus N. To change the sign of everything, we're going to make it N minus P. That's what that does. When you have p minus n, but you divide by minus 1. You change the sign of it, change it round. So instead of being one take the other, you flip it round. We then divide by r squared. So we're going to have n minus p all divided by, not w, divided by r squared equals w. That would be how you do question U. You go through it forwards and then you go through it backwards. Hopefully you've got some questions, or hopefully you either understand or you've got some questions. Good, nice to see you, Ilias, and nice to see everyone, Eddie and Nina. Hopefully you're understanding what's going on here, because I'd like to carry on, but do feel free to ask me any questions if there's anything that's confusing you. So what we did here, we looked at W, and we said, well, what's the story of W? It's been times by r squared, then it was made minus, so we times it by minus 1, then we added n. I know you might be thinking, well, where's the add? This, if you just had it without adding n, would look like this. It would be WR squared minus. Once we want the n bit added to it, then that's when we get n minus. I know you don't see the plus, but it is there because it's effectively plus n. We just don't write plus n. So if anyone's wondering why that is the case, that's what it is. Okay, I'm going to do some more from the list too, because I wanted to do 6 different examples. So now the pen seems to be behaving itself. I'm now going to try and do A and U. So we've got the easiest and the hardest one from the second section. Remember, I'm trying to teach it with a telling the story approach. So the story of T. There was a T, and what happened to it? It got multiplied by a third. And that made H. So when we go backwards, dividing by a third is the same as timesing by 3. This is a common misconception. Timesing by 3 has 2 opposites. You could times it by a third, or you can divide by 3. The opposite of times is divide. The opposite of timesing by a third of 3 is also times by a third. So both of those are the opposites. So I like to use a times by, but do the opposite fraction, called the reciprocal. So the answer here would be T equals 3H. If H is a third of T, T is 3H. Eddie, she has missed a lot. How dare you? I'm only messing around. So we're now going to do the next one. I'm assuming Alicia paused her video, so she'll be able to catch up with us. So the story of T here, there was a T. He gets times by A over B, then times by minus 1. This is how we get the minus. Remember I said it's got a minus here, just like in the one from the previous exercise. Then we add H, and that makes P. So let's tell the story backwards. I'll flip the colour to red. P, we minus H, we divide by minus 1, and we remember what I've said here. I am going to show that the opposite of timesing by A over B is to times by B over A. You could change it to divide, but the other, remember, so timesing by A over B has 2 opposites. We could divide by A over B, but I prefer times by B over A. It's like the opposite way round. And that makes T. I think that gives us T equals, this is P minus H. Remember, if you divide by minus 1, you swap the takeaway round. So it's H minus P. What I've done is I've turned the P has become minus P, and the minus H has become plus H. So that's what dividing by minus 1 does. Then this must be times of B, so I think we get B over A times H minus P. Hopefully you can see that on the screen. I don't know how big that is. I will rub this bit out over here and I'll just make sure I've got a nice big version of the answer, because I want you to understand, and I'll check whether everyone's clear of that. T equals B H minus P all over A. And that makes sense. Hopefully, if you don't understand, feel free to backtrack, rewind the video a little, see if you can understand what's going on. I am doing it by telling the story of T. The story of T, he got multiplied by A over B. Then he got times by minus 1 to make him minus. Then he got added to H. So we're just telling the stories. We've got one more set of questions. There are some squareds involved now. They are not to be scared about. We're going to do these. Oh, we're not going to move that around. We're going to do this one, and we're going to do this one. Do not fear, my young Padawans. We will get this sorted. So, the first question. The story of R. R, he got squared first. Think of Bob Mass or Bib Mass. Squared comes first. Then he got added to T. And that is what made S. So if we read it backwards, we start with S, we minus T, and we square root. I have got people from year 7 up to year 10 here. So if you're year 10, hopefully you already know that the opposite of squaring is square root. So when we do this, I can now use red to show what we get. We get S minus T, the square root of S minus T, and all of it goes in that square root. So R equals the square root of S minus T. Now all the answers are on the worksheet as well, so to help people if they are stuck. I'm also available if anyone gets really stuck. They can also contact me and I'll try and help out. I've done a few live chats with people who've got in touch with me and wanted some help. I'm happy to do that. Obviously, normally if I was doing tutoring in term time, I'm going to have a fee to that. But at the moment, I'm just trying to help people out where possible if I'm available. So that's just that. So last one is the hardest one on the worksheet, technically. If you can follow this, you can follow any of them. You just have to tell the story. The story of R. Once upon a time, there was an R. And what happened with this R is it got times by 2. Because it's all inside a bracket at the moment. Bracket. It got times by 2. Then it got added to C. Then we're outside. Then we've got the bracket. Then the whole bracket got squared. Then it made T. Do you see how we normally do the squared first, but because it's in a bracket, brackets come first because it's brackets indices or brackets order. Therefore, we have to do the whole bracket first. So telling the story backwards, to change the subject, we read the story backwards. There was a T, it got square rooted, then minus C, then divide by 2. Remember, we could do times a half because that is also a thing, and we get R. So let's go through in red what that gives us. We get square root of T. I'm not going to put that there. Square root of T, square root of T, add C. That the square root only goes over the T. Because the takeaway C, the add C is separate, you'll notice it stops and it doesn't. This would be wrong because it's not the square root of C. So we have to be very careful with our writing there. If you prefer, you could write it this way round, C plus root T, just to make sure that you don't accidentally put the C in the wrong place. Both of those would be correct. I don't need the arrow coming back, do I? And then we're going to divide by 2, so we're going to have C plus root T. To divide by 2, just put a bracket, just put a division line or a fraction and make it over 2, and that's what R equals. So there would be your overall changed subject version of U. And obviously I like to do my work properly with a margin and U, and that would be question 3U. And that's how I would write the answer. I would show my working every single time. I would never just write answers. I would show the story every single time. Now some of you might be doing it in an algebraic way, and that's fine. So for example 3A, you could do S equals R squared plus T. I'm now going to take away T. S minus T equals R squared. I'm then going to square root both sides. So square root of S minus T. You'll notice you get the same answer. So that's another way of looking at it. But I think for the moment, today is all about teaching the story method, which is why I've told the story of Maleficent and Sleeping Beauty, to get us this idea of what the story is. and then we have to read the story of the letter that's focused in the inside. If we just chose one more at random, and I will try and change that to an orange, the R here, you need to try and work out the story of what is going on with it without this problem with the head. So there we go. That R has been squared, then added 4, then divide by not by n. The divide bys here, I was having no problem, but it's just decided I think I need to spend this afternoon. These divide bys happen at the end of doing everything else. There is like an invisible set of brackets that we don't see, but there is an invisible set of brackets here, here, and here, and here. So it's just worth noticing that when you've got a fraction like that, there's an invisible set of brackets that kicks in because the whole thing has been divided. So that pretty much leads us to what we've been doing today. We have been talking about changing the subject. So there's a practice makes permanent section. I always want to practice makes permanent. You're not going to learn this just by following the video. You need to go away and practice. You may decide just to do section A. That's absolutely fine. Let's say you're year 7. You might decide, you know what, I just want to do the question 1. What by the time I was getting to the second section and third section Mr. Harris did today, it started getting complicated. That's absolutely understandable and very sensible. If you're year 10, I really would want you pushing to try and do as much as you could. But again, do as much as you can. Ask me questions. The answers are there as well. And then there's also a Taskmaster challenge this week, which is the best pasta picture. Can you send me the best picture, which you can make on a computer or hand make it? It's even better if it's handmade. Don't cook the pasta first. It's much more difficult to stick wet pasta than it is to stick dry pasta. So best pasta picture this week, and also complete the worksheet. I hope today's been useful. That's half an hour of Mr. Harris time you've had teaching you how to change the subject. I hope it's been useful, but do not stop now. Don't go and click on Fortnite. Don't go and open your Xbox until you've done the questions from the worksheet, at least section A, because without doing that, you won't make the knowledge permanent. I have done a lot of research on how we learn. You do not learn by just watching someone do something 6 times and then going off and playing on Xbox. You need to now practice it and get yourself to the stage where you can do it. Thank you. If you have learnt, feel free to drop a like, feel free to subscribe, feel free to tell people about it. The more people here, the more people have interaction, the more I find out when people get stuck, and it's better for everyone. Thank you very much. I've been Mr. Harris. You haven't. Look after yourselves and take care.